Hello. So sorry if this seems kind of random, but I've had a few of my coworkers who are younger than me asking about how to deal with problems at work and with difficult customers, and my ADHD brain likes to problem solve, not with like math, because my brain is also dyscalculic and numbers are icky, but like abstract life problems, I like to think about and solve. Because I remember being kind of like a newer worker when I first started being an adult kind of thing, and how like dealing with like difficult people is kind of like, oh, well, you have to learn on the job, which to me is super frustrating because it's not really a lot of guidance. And since there's really no guidelines around it, like, or maybe it's just that it's so generic, and my brain, I like to be specific. But anyway, my brain just kind of spun into this like tangent over the week about how there's not really a lot of good guidelines for how to deal with customers that are being difficult. There's funny stories online, which is great. I'm not that quick on my feet though. Or you get like management who's always like, well, the customer is always right, and then they just give them whatever they want, which is toxic and creates bad precedent. It's, you know, if you've lived in the US working customer service, you know. I've worked either customer or public service for the last 10-ish years. So I was trying to think of how to explain kind of how I deal with customers that are being difficult to my coworker. And so I wrote down like a couple bullet points that I think are pretty good guidelines for if you have difficult customers, how to kind of de-escalate the situation. Maybe if you're a younger person, you're new to the workforce, you're not quick on your feet or sassy, because I understand, then maybe you'll find this helpful. Maybe you have your own suggestions you want to add. I had like 8 kind of bullet points that I figure I follow kind of in my head when I'm dealing with people. So number one is just like professionalism, which is obviously, no swearing. Big one for me is I have to use my fake customer service voice, because if I'm not paying attention, I don't know, it's just something about my brain. I get kind of monotone, and then people think I'm being a bitch when I'm really not trying to be. Second one, I think, is not taught at all in any kind of like business setting, which is just de-escalation. And a lot of this is just acknowledging the customer's feelings. Like the videos that while back were trending about using gentle parenting techniques on customers, it's kind of just de-escalation. Point number 3 is ability. If the customer wants something that you literally can't provide, then you can't provide it, and I usually just tell them that. Separate it into what I can do and what I can't do. If I can't do it, I can't do it. The fourth point I wrote down is liability, which I think is probably a little bit more of a manager problem, but I still think if you're a frontline customer service worker, you should still be kind of aware of it, which is more of like being polite and empathetic when like something goes wrong with the service, or if they like there's some sort of injury for the customer on property. But otherwise, it's just documenting it and sending it to the management. So the number 5 I wrote down is proportionate recovery, which is just if your business or wherever you work did do something wrong, if you're allowed to do a recovery, you don't need a manager there for it. You just do it. It's proportional to whatever went wrong. You're not giving them a completely free thing just because they thought somebody looked at them wrong. Okay. 6-1, again, I think is a little bit more as a manager, but it's still good to keep in mind. But 6-1 is precedent, which is just remembering that every time you do a recovery, you're setting like a precedent for customers' expectations. And if you're constantly breaking policy or overriding policy as like a one-time thing, then the customers have come to expect that. And then when they talk to someone who is following policy and won't give them that thing, they're going to get mad, and they're going to think one of two is lying, probably the one that's not giving them what they want. And it's just going to cause a bigger negative impact than if the first person had just enforced and explained the policy and made them follow it to begin with. So number 7, I wrote down as like kind of like a rational guided response, where I kind of use it throughout customer interaction. But it is also especially useful if you have to tell a customer no. And despite what any manager will tell you, you do occasionally have to tell customers no, because sometimes they want things that they just can't have. What I've used is kind of a combination of like gray rocking techniques. I forget the name of it, but it's like a repetitive technique where you just tell them the same answer over and over. Not being afraid of silence or feeling that you need to talk the entire time. Sometimes the customer will explain themselves more. Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, if you're dealing with abusive customers, all the techniques that you can use to manage abusive, like family members, partners, friends, are actually pretty good to use here. And then number 8, which I hope would be obvious to everyone, but I wrote it down anyway just in case, is just prioritizing your own physical safety. So if you have a customer that they're in person and they're being creepy or threatening your physical safety or attacking you with like hate speech or whatever, you just tell them they're not allowed to talk to you that way or treat you that way, and either hand them off to the manager, call the police if you need to. Hopefully, you don't need to. But no job's worth like getting hurt over, and your job should provide you with a safe workplace. So yeah, these are my 8 specific tips of how I deal with difficult customers. If you have something that you use that you'd like to add, or I don't know, commentary on mine or questions, feel free to comment. Yeah, and then we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to my brain ramblings. Bye bye.